Welcome back to my channel for another episode of Coffee, Crime, and Crafts. These are bi-weekly episodes where I sit down, enjoy a coffee of some sort, work on a craft project, and discuss, I guess, a crime that has been rattling around in my brain. I've always been fascinated with true crime. Murders, mysteries, disappearances of people, you name it. I've always been intrigued by it. So here we are. Today's episode, I am going to talk about the case of Constantino Danny Filippidis. He is a Canadian firefighter from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And back in 2018, he went missing. He vanished. He disappeared from a ski trip. And lo and behold, he solved his own disappearance by showing up 6 days later and had no memory of what had happened to him. So, grab your drink of choice or snack, grab your craft of choice, and let's get to it. So, I have a dark roast coffee, and today's craft I'm going to be working on, while I have a sip of my coffee there, is actually another Jessica Fletcher sweater. So for those of you who don't know what this is, you can check out my previous episodes. I knit a Mary Maxim sweater, which became affectionately known as the Jessica Fletcher sweater. It's actually, I've got a printed copy of my pattern. It's actually a Mary Maxim sweater called Angler's Pride. I have no idea when this pattern originally came out, but I bought it from the archived section of the Mary Maxim website as a PDF download. And it's a sweater that has these big, huge fish on it. But Jessica Fletcher, the character from Murder, She Wrote, wore it in her first season of the series. And so it affectionately became known as the Jessica Fletcher sweater. I did one for myself. My sister wanted me to do one for her. And at first I told her I didn't think she was knit worthy. But that was just a joke. I said, sure, I'll knit one for you. She purchased the yarn. I'm now knitting the sweater. I had a fair bit of the back panel, which is what this is. I had a fair bit of this done, and I had to rip it completely out. The cream color yarn that I used in my sweater, we couldn't get for this one. It's no longer available. I went with another 5-weight yarn, which is a bulky yarn. And although it's also a 5, it's a little more lightweight than the one that I use. I don't know if that's the right word. It has a little less stiffness, a little less structure, if you will. So when I started knitting it using the same size needles that I had used for mine, it worked out to be smaller. The piece was actually several inches shorter on each end. So I ripped it all back and went up a needle size, and now it seems to be working out okay, which is why I put a lifeline in here, because the band worked fine. And I was trying out the needle size for the body, And if it didn't work, I could rip it back to the lifeline without worrying about dropping any stitches, but I think it's gonna be fine. I don't think I'm gonna have to rip any of those out. So, while I'm talking about Danny, I don't even know how to pronounce his name properly. I think I've listened to like news reports and they pronounce it Filippidis. So that's how I'm gonna call him, Danny Filippidis. So he's a firefighter, like I said, from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And he and his fellow firefighters would go for a ski trip every year to New York State. They used to go to Whiteface Mountain, which is a ski resort in New York. And they went on this ski trip in early February of 2018. So on February the 7th, they were all on the mountain doing their ski runs for the day. And at some point, from what I can find online, Danny went back to his car. So the car was parked at the base of the ski resort in the regular standard parking lot. So he needed to go back to his car for some reason. I heard reports somewhere that he wanted to go back and get a camera. I don't know the real purpose for that, but in any event, he split off from his group. And this was later in the day. It was later in the afternoon. So by 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon, he hadn't returned to the ski lodge and hadn't met back up with his friends. And they all started to get concerned. So they did some looking around for him in the usual places. You know, they checked the ski lodge, they checked the hill, and had someone go down to his car, and there was no sign of him anywhere. So that's when they kind of alerted the authorities that he had gone missing. At that point, it was presumed that maybe he had taken a fall on a ski run and had been knocked out or injured. So the ski patrols started to look for him. And by nightfall, there was still no sign of him. And they all became very worried at that point, not knowing where their friend was, and that the ski patrols had also had no luck in locating him. So what ensued after that was a large, I guess, scale search on the mountain at the resort. And I'm just checking my notes as I go along here as well. And they got in touch with local authorities, and they brought in ground search and rescue teams. They brought in, there was a government agency that was notified. 6 government agencies got involved. Those would be like search and rescue people, people who specialized in missing persons. They had 2 ski patrol units. They had more than 135 volunteers searching. They also enlisted the help of a helicopter. Excuse me, sneezing now. They also enlisted the help of a helicopter, and they also had some dogs out searching as well. So it became a very large-scale manhunt for this individual. His wife had been notified that he had been missing. I'm not sure. I couldn't find much information on her, but I believe she did fly down to New York, or she went to New York as well to be there. I couldn't really verify that. I can't say for certain that's what happened, but I think that's how it went. So they've got this huge, manhunt going on. And after 6 days, the police in Sacramento, California, which is clear across the United States, they get a call from a man saying that he woke up in their area, had no idea how he had gotten there, and he was completely disoriented and was requesting help. So, of course, the police authorities in Sacramento, they had no idea that there was this missing skier in New York. It's clear on the other side of the country. But when they went to pick him up, he gave them, I guess, some information of where he was. They found him next to a car rental agency by the Sacramento airport. And when the police officers pulled up, he looked disoriented, but he looked clean and healthy. There didn't appear to be any injuries. But he was still wearing his full ski gear. Like, he was wearing his jacket, his pants, his boots. I saw a report somewhere that said he still had his ski helmet with him. But he had no idea what day it was. He didn't exactly know where he came from or how he had gotten to Sacramento. He knew his name, and when they did a search for him in their computer database, lo and behold, they come up with the information that he's a missing person in New York, verifying his story that he didn't really know how he got to where he was. So in the meantime, varying weather conditions on the ski hill had kind of hampered the search off and on. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how he, I guess, knew or figured out to call the police, because he was quite disoriented. So let me back up a little bit. So what happens is he goes skiing with the friends. He goes back to his car. He goes missing. They can't find him. That's on the 7th of February. On the 13th of February, 6 days later, his wife gets a phone call from a phone number that she does not recognize. And when she answered the phone, it was Danny on the other end of the phone. His voice was kind of garbled a bit. He sounded disoriented, but she recognized his voice and she knew it was him. Like no mistaking it. So she was in the midst of, trying to figure out where he was and where he was calling from when the call dropped. So he called back a second time. And when she got him on the phone this time, she didn't really waste any time. She told him, I don't really care you know, where you are, what's going on. I need you to call 911. You need to call 911. You've been missing for 6 days. We've been looking for you. Nobody knows where you are. Call 911 and get an officer to come locate you and find you. So at the urging of his wife, he did disconnect the call. He did dial 911. He told the local dispatcher in Sacramento that he was disoriented. He had very few memories of the last several days, but he was currently outside of this car rental agency near Sacramento Airport, and he needed assistance. So a couple of deputies get in their car, you know, they roll up and they locate him standing outside of this airport car rental place, still in his ski gear. They come to determine that there's a couple of things. He's got this brand new iPhone that it wasn't his phone that he had with him, you know, when they went skiing, or that he had left in his car. This was a brand new iPhone. That's why his wife didn't recognize the phone number when he called. He had a haircut, and the only other things he had on him was he had a credit card and he had $1,000 in cash money. I don't know if he used the credit card to do a cash advance. I don't even know how you can buy an iPhone without having some identification or something, unless it's possible in the States. I don't know. I guess maybe it is that you can buy an iPhone pay as you go, like just purchase it outright. Like, I don't know. Anyway, so that was all he had on him. He had no identification, clean cut, credit card, $1,000, iPhone in hand. So the police in Sacramento, because he was so disoriented, they did take him to a hospital to get checked out. And they confirmed that he was the missing person from New York, based on photographs, and they spoke to his wife. At the hospital, they determined he didn't have any major injuries, but a neurologist medically examined him, and I don't know if they did a CAT scan or what, but they did confirm that he had suffered some sort of what they thought was a severe concussion. So they think he had a head trauma of some sort. And the next day, I guess with there being no medical reason not to, he seemed to be back to normal somewhat by the next day. They put him on a plane and he flew back to New York. Very weird. So he still doesn't remember much of what happened. They think, in piecing everything together, that he actually, on the run back to the car, had some sort of accident where he struck his head and was close enough to the parking lot of the ski resort at the time when that happened, that when he, I guess, came to from the blow to the head, he got up and kind of shook it off and walked out into the car park and hitchhiked. He has very little memory of the 6 days that he was missing, but he does remember being in a big rig, like a tractor trailer. And to this day, they haven't been able to locate a tractor trailer driver who says that they picked him up. Now, some people think, okay, this guy just kind of, decided he was going to leave his life and faked his disappearance sort of thing, intended to never come back, and then regretted it and decided that he'd make up this whole cockamamie story about not remembering anything. Other people say, oh, well, he just went off and, had some sort of fling or affair for the 6 days he was gone and made up this whole story to cover up what actually happened. But the thing is that when you have a severe concussion, you can get what's called retrograde or anterograde amnesia. Now, it doesn't happen a lot, but it happens in about 10% of cases, I think. I read that somewhere. So you don't remember anything, say, leading up to the accident, and you may or may not remember the accident itself. And then you'll have holes in your memory after the accident, like during the time that your brain would be healing, let's say, from the concussion. So they think that this is actually the explanation of why he can't remember, because, like I said, he was seen by a doctor at the hospital in Sacramento, and they do think that based on questioning him, and I guess they must have done some tests there, they do believe he suffered a head injury. So he has very few memories. He doesn't remember falling or having an accident. He does remember leaving his friends and skiing down the slope. He remembers being in a big rig, like a transport truck type vehicle. He remembers sleeping a lot, and that someone told him that they had entered Utah, and then nothing else until he ended up in Sacramento. And when the police found him there, he said that he remembered being dropped off by this big rig across from a McDonald's that was next to a really tall building. And then his memories are kind of fuzzy throughout that day. The police think he may have slept outdoors the night of the 12th of February. And then somehow by the morning of the 13th, he ended up at this car rental place near the airport. Now, where he describes being dropped off, the police think that was near Richards Boulevard along the I-95. And the airport where he was located is 13 miles away from there. So even still, that day, he somehow made it from Richards Boulevard to the airport. And they don't know how he did that, unless he walked it. His sense of time was completely impaired. He didn't even know what day it was. So he gets back to New York, and they discover that they think he has this retrograde, anterograde amnesia. And everybody can't believe that he's alive. To this day, they have no idea what actually happened to him. A year after this incident, he returned to work, but he still has no memory other than those couple of memories of being in a big rig. He still has no memory of the incident itself. And it's really, really odd. So, what do you think was the was the reason he disappeared. Was he really trying to get away from his life, or did he go have a fling somewhere just to get away? Or, you know, did he really have an incident where he just has literally no memory of what had occurred? Some people think this is really odd because obviously he had to be carrying on a conversation with someone during those 6 days that he was missing, traveling in a truck. I mean, someone's not going to pick up an individual on the side of the road and that person not say anything about, you know, where they're going or what they're doing or, you know, that sort of thing. I can speak to a little bit of having a personal experience with someone who's had a severe concussion like that and how it affects their memory. My husband, years ago, he suffered an injury at work. Now this was before we were married. So, gosh, we're married 24 years. So it was, you know, it was that long ago. But what happened was my husband was at work one night. He was working as a mechanic at the time in a local garage. And it was November, so there were a lot of tire changes, people wanting to have their winter tires put on. He was working late in the evening, and he had gone up this, I don't know, staircase, like ladder type thing they had for the big tire racks that are up against the wall in the garage. And I guess with the snow or water, whatever, he slipped and fell. So he actually fell 14 feet and landed on his head on the concrete garage floor. It knocked him out. He lost consciousness. His co-workers that were there rushed over. They ended up getting him to the hospital. And at the hospital, he was completely confused and disoriented. He was giving our current phone number at the time, but our old address that we had lived at previously. He couldn't remember my surname. We were living together at the time, and all he could tell the nurse was, can you call my girlfriend Pam? She works at the airport hotel. That was all he knew. He couldn't give her a phone number. He couldn't tell her my last name. Anyway, I'm working, and sure enough, I get a call at the front desk. And I answer the phone, and this lady's on the other end, and she asked me if this was Pam, and I said yes. And she said, do you know Darren Reed? And I said yes. And she basically went on to tell me that he had an accident at work. He was completely fine, but they wanted me to attend the hospital because I was the only next of kin that he had here in the province at the time. So I dropped everything at work. I went to the hospital, and when I got there, they warned me that his short-term memory was like kaput. So for the 4 or 5 hours that I was with him that night at the hospital, he didn't know what day of the week it was. He thought it was early October, and it was actually mid-November. Again, he had the addresses mixed up. He was giving an old address of where we lived previously, but our current phone number. He kept asking me a couple of questions the whole night. He would ask me, have you called mom and dad? And I would say to him, well, I'm going to call them once you have your CAT scan results, because I didn't want to call his parents in another province and scare the bejesus out of them. And then he would say to me, oh, I'm having a CAT scan done. And I said, yes, you know, I already told you that. And he goes, okay. And then he would say to me, so who's covering you at work? And I'd tell him. And then he'd go right back to question number 1 again. So did you call mom and dad? And he did that continuously in a loop for hours. And he stayed in the hospital for 3 days. I think they kept him in hospital. His concussion was so bad. So he was awake, alert, could carry on a conversation by day 2 without repeating himself too much. And even though he was repeating those questions to me, like we did have a conversation that night, so he could speak clearly. But for a week or 2 after that accident, he was home, and he has no memory of like people dropping by to visit. He, like that 2-week period is a complete gray area to this day in his brain. He does not know. He doesn't remember the actual accident. The guys from work told him what had happened, that he had fallen off the ladder and his leg basically got hooked in the ladder, and that's how he ended up falling head first, landing on his head. His leg was like tangled up in the ladder part. Very bizarre. So I'm kind of the mindset that this guy actually did have a traumatic head injury and literally has no idea what happened to him over those 6 days. Only because I've got that personal experience that we had with Darren when he went through a similar brain injury. Very weird. So I know this was a quick little episode. Just a quick little missing person case that ended up solving itself in the end. I'm actually working on an episode based on Kristen Smart, another missing person case from the United States. But that episode, there's so much to unpack. I think it might actually end up being 2 episodes or 1 super long Coffee, Crime, and Craft, like an epic episode. I didn't want to rush it and have it ready for this week. That's why I just picked this little missing persons case that kind of solved itself for now. Because that Kristen Smart missing person case, that actually happened like 25 years ago, and they finally arrested someone for her in relation to her disappearance last week. And he's been charged with murder. So there's a whole lot of information. That's going to be a really interesting episode. In the meantime, I hope you did enjoy this little conversation. I managed to finish the last couple rows I had to do of the plain knitting before I start the color bands on the back of the sweater. The New York State Police, in relation to this case, is still interested if anyone can provide any information for what happened to Danny Filippidis during those 6 days. If you do have any information, if you saw him along the way, if you know someone who may have picked him up on the side of the road and given him a ride, you can certainly contact the New York State Police at 518-873-2750, and I'll put that information on the screen. Like I said, they've gone on the assumption that he was in some sort of state caused by the concussion, or sometimes people can go into a fugue state caused by a traumatic event. A lot of people that I've seen articles about this wonder why wasn't his credit card checked or the bank account checked to see. I don't know where the money came from. And I don't know if he actually did use that credit card. It was 3 or 4 years ago, so certainly it was well within the realm of possibility to do a quick online bank search or credit card search to see if he had used either of those 2 pieces. I don't know if that was ever done, because originally they were just based on the assumption that he was lost somewhere at the ski resort injured, had gone off the side of the mountain or had gone off the side of a ski slope somewhere. The other thing is, people wonder how come the truck driver who picked him up, that person has never been found or has never come forward. There's a possibility that that person doesn't want to come forward because it's actually, most companies, if you're working truck driving for a company, you're not allowed to pick up people. You're not allowed to pick up hitchhikers. And so maybe the person at the time who picked him up didn't want to have his identity found out because he didn't want to take the chance he would lose his job. I have no idea. So there's still lots of unanswered questions about this case, but I thought it was kind of interesting at the same time. So I hope everyone's having a fabulous day. Make sure you come back in 2 weeks to check out my episode I'm going to do on Kristen Smart. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a well done episode. I've got so much information and notes. I think I've got like 8 pages of just point form jot notes that I have to kind of cull together into some sort of episode. Plus, I haven't even taken any notes regarding the recent development that happened last week. So I have to go back and start reading through articles and court documents that I can find online about them being charged. If you enjoy my episodes, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss anything upcoming. And if you'd like to support me and what I'm doing here on the channel, you can always buy me a coffee. Keep me going in my coffee money. I'll put a link down below for my Buy Me a Coffee account. Until next time, have a great week, and we'll chat with you again soon.